I'm not talking about advanced size fish or those older age fish that are very reproductively important. So there's the truth of the matter is we need to, as an angler group, become really good stewards. And the difference in stewardship and conservation is, of course, conservation. You're trying to protect or preserve a species, or maybe restore it once it's lost. Where stewardship is more about the educated use of a resource. So I'm going to use it. I'm going to take from it the part that I need to take from it, either for my consumptive reasons or because it's better for the management, but I'm doing so from an educated place. And what we're seeing now with the popularity of bass fishing podcast and the whole community has been reaching out to scientists like myself for more educational materials. And you're starting to hear a concise message from scientists is learn the regulation and participate by removing some fish when applicable, and participate by protecting fish whenever you're in a tournament situation. You're targeting the largest individuals.
So when we say let's harvest some of the juvenile fish, like where do people draw the line? It's relative, right? Because Texas, Florida, they hold a lot of like bigger fish. What you consider, I guess, a small bass here in Texas is not what you consider a small bass in Ohio. So for the Texas standpoint, since we're both in Texas, if I catch a fish, if it's under what either weight or size, should I consider harvesting? And where should I say, maybe let that one go?
Okay. Yeah, I completely understand, Armando. We have to start with, you have to work within the regulation. If we're on a public body of water and that has a 14-inch minimum length limit, that means any fish below 14 inches, you have to release. And the reason those limits exist like that is mainly to protect fish until they're sexually reproductive. So a female bass can spawn starting at 10 to 12 inches. And by making it 14 inches, that gives them 3 to 4 years of life. And then if they come out of the system, they've contributed to it. So we're not as concerned. Other states like Florida, their regulations allow for the harvest of smaller fish. They need more fish out of the system, because here's the hard part. Fish grow through what's called indeterminate growth. And what that means is they grow throughout their life based solely on what they eat. So there's no way to look at a fish and say, okay, this fish is 16 inches. That means that it's 5 years old. It is an older fish. Because the reality is, in really, really good systems, you can grow a 16-inch fish in 2.5 years. Wow. In really poor systems, the fish may never reach 16 inches. That's because of carrying capacity and the ability to consume food. It takes 10 pounds of forage to gain 1 pound on a fish, plus they have to eat 5 pounds of forage every year to maintain their body weight per pound of body weight. So, for example, a 2-pound fish has to eat 5 pounds for the first pound of weight, 5 pounds for the second pound of weight, so 10 pounds that year to maintain its size. It needs then an additional 10 pounds, so 30 pounds total, to go to a 3-pound fish. In some systems, it can't do that. And that's what we would call an undersized or stunted fish. And so the hard part about your question is, I can't universally say you should look for this size fish and pull it out, because every system the fish grow different. What I will say is, if a regulation exists, like a protected slot limit, where like we think a Lake Fork has a protected slot, it allows for fish below a certain length to be removed. Well, the reason that exists there is because they need fish out of the system at that size. Then it protects fish in the middle. And it protects those fish in the middle because those are the most valuable fish in that population. They are growing to the correct size, they're contributing reproductively at a high level, and they're valuable to anglers. So you have to learn regulation first and understand why it's in place. Now, in most systems across Texas, there's a 14-inch minimum length limit. That's because it's really easy for us to understand that. In those systems, harvesting at the bottom end, so let's say from 14 to 15 or 14 to 16 inches, is where you as an angler can contribute most to the population. if you caught a really fat 16-inch fish that you're like, man, this 16-inch fish weighs 2.5 pounds, and that's big for the system, then you should say, that fish is probably growing really well. I should release it. If you catch a very skinny 18-inch fish that is really skinny and shouldn't be that skinny, that's the kind of fish that you would want to remove. But as a general rule, like you have to get good at understanding regulation and why it's in place, and that's what's difficult.
And one thing that I got out of a lot of what you said, obviously all of it makes sense. What I think sometimes is the social media part of it. It's like if somebody posts, like you see it all over Facebook and Instagram, anybody posts, they're harvesting bass, immediately the comment section goes crazy,
Right.
without us knowing that probably that's what we should all be doing. Like,
yes, at
I
one
think that
point,
that part of education is important.
at one point in 1970, 1980s, we harvested bass at a very high rate. And then we started the catch and release. Ray Scott really started it, catch and release. And that took off to the point now where we harvest fish at a very low rate. And I see the numbers from different state agencies on analysis of their reservoirs, because they track these things. And we're seeing single digit harvest rates coming out of reservoirs as a percentage of the fish caught.